Masechet Zevaḥim Daf Peh Amar Rabbi Yochanan Hashochet behema balayla bifnim v'ha'ela bachutz hayav. Rabbi Yochanan is referring to the prohibition that's mentioned in Vayikra 17 that anyone who offers a burnt offering or a sacrifice and does not bring it to Ohel Moed will get karet. So you're not allowed to make any sacrifice outside of the Ohel Moed Mishkan Bet HaMikdash. And so now the question is, what if someone did shechita at night inside the temple courtyard? We mentioned that, at least according to Rabbi Yehuda, that is totally disqualified. If someone does shechita at night, then if he puts it on the mizbeach, you have to take it down because it's considered like nothing. It's totally invalid. So therefore, you might think that this shechita is not even considered shechita because it's done at night. And if that's done inside the Bet HaMikdash, and then you take it outside and offer it on an altar outside, you might think it would be not liable because the shechita is not a valid shechita. But Rabbi Yochanan comes to teach us, not so. He is liable. That shechita, although shechita at night is invalid for proper Bet HaMikdash service, still it's good enough for the shechutei chutz, for offering a korban outside of the mikdash. It is considered a valid sacrifice for the altar outside, and therefore is liable. Why? Lo teheh pechuta mishochet bachutz u'ma'aleh bachutz. Doing slaughter at night shouldn't be any less severe than doing shechita outside of the temple courtyard and offering it outside. If someone does shechita and offers it on the mizbeach also outside the temple, they are liable against this prohibition, even though doing shechita outside of the temple courtyard for a consecrated animal would make it invalid for the Bet HaMikdash. So just like doing it outside, slaughtering outside, still it's valid enough that it's liable. So too, slaughtering it at night also is valid enough that one would be liable for then sacrificing it outside. That's Rabbi Yochanan's chidush. Matib Rav Chia bar Avin hashochet off bifnim u'ma'aleh bachutz patur shachat bachutz u'ma'aleh bachutz chayav. A challenge against Rabbi Yochanan from a Mishnah later on in this Masechet that says, if someone does shechita on a bird inside the temple, now inside the Bet HaMikdash, you're supposed to do melika on a bird. That's the proper way to slaughter it. Shechita is invalid, so therefore this off would be invalid in the Bet HaMikdash. And so if you do the shechita inside and then you take it outside, patur, one is not liable. In other words, because shechita is not a proper way of doing of killing the animal inside, even though you take it outside, that's not a valid way. It wasn't killed in the right way, and therefore patur. Whereas if you do shechita outside of the Bet HaMikdash and offer it on the mizbeach outside, then one is liable because outside of the mikdash, shechita is a proper way to kill an animal. And so we ask, why not say over here also that the bird that you do shechita to that bird inside the mikdash should not be any less severe than an animal that you slaughter in the mikdash and you bring outside. And we know an animal that you slaughter inside and take outside, that wouldn't be liable. So a bird should be also at least as bad. In other words, according to you, to Rabbi Yochanan, where you apply that logic to your case of doing it at night, then why not apply that same logic here? And therefore, someone who did shechita of a bird inside and then burnt it outside should be liable. Tiyupta, this is a good refutation. That's one opinion. Or if you do want to answer it, it seems like tiyupta was the earlier a version of this sugya. That's it, ended here. And then later on, someone said, wait, we actually have an answer. So they added it on. You could say that shechita of a bird in the Bet HaMikdash is not considered a proper killing at all. It's like just killing it, it's like just decapitating it. If you just rip its head off, that would certainly not be a valid form of killing it. and therefore would be totally invalid. So that's the difference. That's why, if regarding a bird, doing shechita inside, we don't recognize that act as significant at all. It's like just killing it in a random way. And therefore, when you burn it outside, it's totally invalid. But shechita that you do at night, like shechita that you do to an animal outside, is a valid act, and which makes sense because although Rabbi Yehuda says it's totally invalid, remember that Rabbi Shimon says in that case it is valid enough that if you did, it's invalid, but if you put it on, then you would not take it off. So that could be a distinction between the two cases. Amar Ula. Ula presents the following law. Emure kodashim kalim shehe'elan lifnei zirikat aman lo yerdu na'asu lachmo shel mizbeach. If you have the insides of kodashim kalim, like korban shelamim, and you put those innards, they're supposed to go on the mikdash, but the proper order is first you sprinkle the blood, and then those innards go on the mikdash, go on the mizbeach. But if you put the innards on the mizbeach first and before you sprinkled the blood, well, b'di'avad, leave them there, don't bring them down. Why? They have become the bread of the altar. That's Ula's principle. We're going to discuss this for a while. Amar Rabbi Zera, afana namet tenena. Rabbi Zera says we can bring support for this from the Baraita. This is the Baraita that we mentioned after the Mishnah that listed according to Rabbi Shimon. Says Olah, I know only Olah, how about all these other things, and included lots of other items. Shenishchata balayla, shenishpach dama, she'asa dama achus lakilaim. If the blood was spilled onto the floor directly from the animal's neck and never received in a vessel, or it was taken outside of the courtyard, and so on. These are all things that Rabbi Shimon says is b'di'avad valid. So we're going to quote a section of that. So that's what said. The Baraita said that if the blood is all spilt, or if it was taken outside of the courtyard, and then it's still valid b'di'avad. You don't bring it down. So we have a kal vachomer. If in that case where even if you wanted to sprinkle the blood, there's no more blood. It all spilled out on the floor. And yet in that case, if the meat of the korban goes on, that shouldn't put it on, but if it goes on, you just leave it there. And so if it goes on, don't bring it down. Over here, where you have the blood, you just didn't sprinkle it yet, and the innards went up on, and then you could still sprinkle it afterwards because you do have the blood. It's available. So it seems like this would be a better case. So all the more so when you put the emurim on too early, you can leave them there. Then you'll go do the blood after. At least you'll do the blood sprinkling at some point. So isn't that a good proof for Ula? Tergema kodshe kodashim. So not necessarily. It could be that line in the Braita is referring not to kodashim kalim, because that's what Ula said, kodashim kalim. But maybe that line in the Braita is only talking about kodshe kodashim, like a korban olah. The difference is that a korban olah or any kodshe kodashim, the animal is already sanctified from the moment that you sanctify it. It's already holy, and you would be liable to me'ilah. Even while it's alive, not like kadashim kalim, where one is not liable to me'ilah while it's alive, but rather it only becomes entirely fit for the mizbeach after you sprinkle the blood. And so the fact that it says here that if the blood all spilt, then the meat, if you put it on, is still okay. Maybe it's still okay for kodashim, kodshe kodashim, which are intrinsically holier, but that's not a proof that this would be true for kodashim kalim. But we ask about this, Hare Pesach de Kadashim Kalim Hu, in the continuation of the Baraita that we saw in the previous daf is mentioned Pesach and Chatat, that you offer it Shelo Lishma. So since it has Korban Pesach in the list, and Pesach is Kadashim Kalim, so doesn't that mean that this Baraita is also including Kadashim Kalim, and it would be a good proof for Ula? No, Tirgema b'Shelo Lishman. That line, that section in the Baraita is talking about where the Korban Pesach is pasul because you gave it Shelo Lishman, which is in fact what it says, that you had in in mind a different korban, and that makes a korban Pesach pasul. But it's not referring to a case where you sprinkled the blood after the emurim, which was what we were talking about before. So the beginning of the Braita is talking only about Kodesh Kodashim. This part over here is talking about Kodesh Kodashim, and says if the blood went on the floor, you can still leave it up. But this part about Pesach is the problem is only that Shelo Lishman, not that the order of the blood was wrong. And so therefore there's no proof from there. Let's try again. Tenan vechulan she'alu chayin lagabe mizbeach yerdu. In the Mishnah on the previous daf, at the end of the Mishnah, it said that just like all these cases, if they go up, they do not come down. So too, if they come down, we don't put them back up. And then it says that kulan she'alu chayin losh mizbeach yerdu. If any of these go up while they're alive, then we do bring them down. A live animal, you always bring down. So let's analyze that part of it. Ha-shechutin lo yirdu. So we can infer, since it says live animals, the kulan, it says all live animals that are that go up, you bring them down. So we can infer that if they did shechita on the animals, then they do not come down. So what case is that talking about? My love, lo shena kodesh kodashim, lo shena kodashim kalim. Since it says all animals, then the inference also should be regarding all animals, and that includes kodesh kodashim and kodashim kalim, which means all animals that you did shechita and it's up there on top, even though you didn't sprinkle the blood yet, because you just did shechita, nevertheless, they stay up. So actually, what this would be a good proof for ula from this line in the Mishnah. Isn't that a good inference? La ha-shechutin mehen yerdu, mehen lo yerdu. No, it could be that the inference is only partial. The Mishnah says all animals that go up while they're alive, they come down. But you can infer from that all animals that you did shechita definitely don't stay up. No, some of them stay up, some of them don't stay up. The inference is only partial. Kulan kataniya, but it says all. No, kulam ahayim. When it says all, that's referring to the live ones. All live animals, kodashim kalim, kodashim kodesh kodashim, and kodashim kalim. All live animals that are up, that go up on the mizbeach, come down. But the inference that when you do shechita, that the all does not apply to the inference, only some and some. So that if it's kodesh kodashim and you did shechita, that you leave up there even though you didn't sprinkle the blood yet. But kodashim kalim could be not so. You did, even though you did shechita, but you didn't sprinkle the blood yet, no, you bring that meat down. Pishita. Now, wouldn't that be obvious that if it's a live animal, that you would leave it, that you bring it down? Of course, a live animal, you bring it down. Why do you even have to teach us this? In other words, if you're not learning anything from the inference, then what's the point of the law itself? No, in fact, it's talking about live animals that they come down, and we need this as a chidush, because we're talking about a korban that has a blemish, a small blemish, just a cataract in the eye, which is still a blemish, and we're following the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva said if you have a blemished animal, then you slaughtered it and all that, and then you put it up, then it doesn't come down. Because this is a relatively small blemish, so b'di'avad, you can leave it up. Now, I might have thought that even alive, that I could put it up there because it has a blemish even while it's alive, unlike all the other pisulim, which occur only after it's dead. But this is a blemish that makes it invalid even while alive. So I might have thought that if I bring a blemished animal up on top, a small blemish that Rabbi Akiva would say that you can leave it there. No, that's why I need this line. It's not pashut. I have to learn this chidush. That even according to Rabbi Akiva, who says that such a blemished animal can be left up there, that's only if it's slaughtered. But if it's alive, we bring it down. B'mai okimta bifstulin. So, in what case did we assume that this last part of the Mishnah is talking about? Oh, it's talking about a korban that's pasul, and you bring it up there, like we just said, it has a blemish, and you bring it up there, then you have to take it back down. Ema sefa, if it's talking about an invalid animal, then how do you explain the continuation of the Mishnah that teaches, V'chen ola she'alta haya l'rosh mizbeach tered, shechata b'rosh mizbeach mizbeach yafshit v'inateach bimkomah. That a olah that you bring up live, you on top of the mizbeach, that you bring down. But if you did shechita on top of the mizbeach, then you should skin it and cut it up into pieces right there on top of the mizbeach. Now, if the korban is pasul, you brought up a korban with a mum in it, can you skin it and cut it up? We learn from the pasuk that you cut it up, that means only if it's kasher. But if it's invalid, then you do not skin it nor and cut it up. So we wouldn't be cutting it up. The Mishnah can't be in that case. Okay, that part of the Mishnah that says that if it's slaughtered up there, then you do skin it and cut it up there. That is talking about a kosher animal. It's switched to a different case. So what is it teaching us? If it's a valid animal, then of course you're going to cut it up and skin it. That is teaching us that you can do that on top of the mizbeach. You don't have to bring it back down where you usually cut it up and skin it, but rather you can do it all right up there on the mizbeach. But what about an opinion? There is an opinion that says you cannot skin and cut up an animal on top of the mizbeach. According to him, then, what does this mean? According to that opinion, you have to say it's talking about an animal that was valid, and it was slaughtered while valid, and there was a time when the blood was still valid and could be presented, and then it became pasul afterwards. So, since it was valid, therefore you can do the skinning and the flaying. That's what it's talking about. V'Rabbi Shimon, V'Rabbi Elazar, V'Rabbi Shimon hi de'amar kevan she'izrak adam v'rusa basar sha'achat yafshitena ve'ora lakohanim. And we're following the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, who said that since the blood was sprinkled and therefore the flesh is acceptable even for one moment, even if it afterwards becomes invalid, still you can skin it and you give the skin to the Kohanim. Even though now it's invalid, if it had been invalid from the beginning, then you would not skin it and the Kohanim would not get any. But since it was valid, now you can continue and skin it and flay it. Okay, but now, what about the part of the Mishnah that says, how do you do it? You skin it, you cut it up, and you take the innards, the intestines, and you take them down from the mizbech and you wash them. In general, a korban, the innards that have all junk in them, you don't just burn it on the mizbech like that with the dung inside. It's not nice. Rather, you clean it out first, and then you burn those intestines on the mizbeach. And here, even though it's already on top, and you did shechita on top, and you skin it, and the skin goes to the kohanim, and you cut it up, and the meat will go directly on the mizbeach, but the innards have to be cleaned out, so bring them down to clean them out. So now we ask, why are you going to clean them out? Because after all, you're going to bring them down, and once you bring them down, well, you're not supposed to bring them up. So why are you going to clean it? If you're going to bring it down anyway, just leave it down, unclean. Well, what does he wants to do? Leave it up there and put it on the mizbeach with its dung in it? The pasuk in Malachi says, go try to present this now to your governor. Will it please him? Will he accept your person? So the Navi is talking to people who are bringing korbanot that are not proper. Even if you'd give it to a human governor, would he accept it? All the more so, you should not bring it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as a korban. This is a disgusting korban. So obviously we're not going to burn it with the garbage inside it. So that's impossible. Of course we're going to have to bring it down. No, my question was, of course you're going to bring it down. You can't burn it like that, all dirty up there. The question is, okay, bring it down. Once you bring it down, you're not going to put it back up. So therefore, why not just leave it dirty? Why clean it if you're not going to burn it anyway? The answer is, because maybe another Kohen will come, a new shift comes, and the next Kohen will come and see it, and he won't know that this is innards from an invalid animal. And they'll think, oh, I guess this belongs on the Mizbeach, and he'll go put it up on the Mizbeach, thinking that's a valid animal. So we want to clean it so that if and when he makes a mistake and puts it up, at least it'll be clean. Wait a second. Are we going to go do something that's going to cause a stumbling block to a next Kohen? Isn't it better to leave it dirty so that the next Kohen will come and say, oh, this is all dirty. Oh, maybe it's invalid. Rather than if you clean it, then the next Kohen, certainly, all the more so, will assume that, oh, someone cleaned it, they forgot to put it on. I better go put it on. So you go causing a stumbling block, causing the next Kohen to put on an invalid part of an animal. Even so, that is a worry, it's true, but nevertheless, there's a greater worry that Kodesh Shamayim, this animal was sanctified, and therefore it still retains some level of holiness and should be treated with respect, even though it became invalid in some way. So therefore, we should not allow consecrated animals to be left aside like a carcass. That's not nice, and therefore, we're not going to just leave it aside with its dirt in it like a carcass. We're going to clean it. At least it should be respectful. Even though by cleaning it, it increases the chance that a next Kohen may come along and by mistake put it on the Mizbeach. That is a worry. Put a sign on it. Try to make sure that doesn't happen. But anyway, that worry is less than leaving it disgusting with the dung in it. That's a more important consideration. אמר רבי חייא בר אבא בער רבי יוחנן אמורי קודשים קלים שהעלה לפני זריקת המן ירדו או לא ירדו. Now we're going back to the statement that Ula said and asking whether that is in fact the halacha. Rabbi חייא bar Abba said that Rabbi Yochanan asked, if you have the innards of Kadashim Kalim that were placed on the Mizbeach before the blood was sprinkled, then do you take those innards down or do you leave them up? Ula already gave a psak halacha that lo yerdu, you keep them up, they become food for the Mizbeach. But Rabbi Yochanan was not sure of what the law is, so he asked about it. Amar le Rabbi Ameh v'tiba elach me'ila. Rabbi Ameh says, why are you asking about whether they come down or not? Why don't you ask about me'ila? The law for Kodashim Kalim is that after you sanctify them, if you would get personal benefit from the animal, you would still not commit me'ilah. Unlike Kodashim Kalim, which have intrinsic holiness from the moment that you consecrate them and you are liable to me'ilah, Kodashim Kalim are not subject to me'ilah until the time of Zerika. And so now the question is, this is before you sprinkled the blood, but the meat has been placed on the Mizbeach. So do you commit me'ilah because they were now placed on the Mizbeach? Why don't you ask that question? Amar le me'ilah la kami ba'eli desrikahu de kab'alehu b'me'ilah. And Rabbi Yochanan says, no, I didn't ask about me'ilah because I know the law, and it remains the same, that zerika, the sprinkling of the blood, that's what establishes Kadashim Kalim to be liable to me'ilah. And therefore, putting the innards on the Mizbeach beforehand is not going to change that, not liable to me'ilah. But I do want to know is, do you bring it down? Ufashit lo yerdu ve'en behen me'ilah. And after that, Rabbi Yochanan resolved his question, and he explained that they do not come down, the same as Ula's opinion, and also there is no me'ilah. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Manehachi. There's another version of this question and answer by Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. His version said as follows: Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba ba'er Rabbi Yochanan emurek kodashim kalim she'elan lifnei zirikat daman yesh ben me'ilah or lo. According to this version, Rabbi Yochanan asked about the innards of kodashim kalim that were placed onto the mizbeach before the blood was sprinkled, would one be liable to me'ilah or not? And to that, Rabbi Ameh asked, Amar le Rabbi Ameh v'tiba adach yerida. Why are you asking about me'ilah? Why don't you ask whether they come down or not? Amar le yerida la kami ba yalid asu lachmo shel mizbeach. And Rabbi Yochanan says, no, I know the answer to that already. That they do. I didn't ask about that because they become the bread of the mizbeach and they do not come down. Kimi ba yalid me'ilah. But I had a question about me'ilah. Usually, you wait till the zirikah, that makes it liable to me'ilah. But here, since you put the innards on beforehand, maybe that would make it me'ilah. And then he answered the question that in fact they do not come down and there is no me'ilah. Now the following, then back to the Mishnah, gives a list of things where the disqualification did not happen in sanctity in the Beit HaMikdash while during the service. And therefore, these things are really bad, and if you put them up, you bring them down. And included on this list is robeya and nirba, an animal that's involved in bestiality, either as the active or passive partner. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, lo hichshir Rabbi Akiva ele bedukin shebayin, ho'elu shirim be'ofot. And as part of this this list, also we mentioned something that has a mum. Now, something has a mum, that's not something that happened in sanctity, it got a mum separately. So these things, if it has a mum and it goes up, then it comes down. But Rabbi Akiva in the Mishnah said that, if it has a mum, then and you put it up, you leave it up. Rabbi Yochanan says, hold on, Rabbi Yochanan wasn't talking about a big mum, like if it's missing a limb, but rather Rabbi Akiva only permitted to leave it up if it has a small mum, meaning a problem in the eye. He had the cornea of his eye, that's a blemish that does make it unfit to be a korban, lecha techila, but b'di'avad, it's a small thing, and therefore, if you put it on, it's okay, you can leave it there. Why? What's the difference? It's still a mum, so a mum is a mum. What's the difference if it's big or small? The difference of this is, ho'iluch sherim be'afot, regarding a bird, it's if a bird has a mum in its eye, same thing, cornea of the eye, it's not a mum for birds. A bird that lecha techila, it's okay. So since there is a situation in which this blemish in the eye is okay regarding birds, therefore, b'di'avad, if you put an animal up there that has this blemish, you leave it up there. However, that's only if it became hekdesh first and then it got a mum. Then the kedusha applies to it. It's a consecrated animal, but it has the small mum, there is a situation in which it could be good in a bird, so therefore it's okay. But if the mum came first, now it has a blemish. When you come to sanctify it, you're already sanctifying a blemished animal. It's already bad to begin with. There, Rabbi Akiva would say, no, you don't. Then you bring it down. Rabbi Akiva agrees that if you have a female animal that you sanctify as a korban olah. Now, korban olah can only be male animals. So therefore, this case is just like a case where the blemish precedes the consecration, and therefore that also will descend from the altar. You tried to make an olah out of a female, but you can't. And so that is a fundamental pre-existing blemish, and therefore it comes down. Rabbi Yirmiyah asked an interesting question. Is there a prohibition of robeya and nirba, of a sin of bestiality, when it comes to birds? Do we apply that with if a bird was involved in such a sin? Does it become disqualified for being a korban, or does it not apply? So let's see. The pasuk says anything from when you want to bring a korban, you bring it from animals. So from animals means not all animals are allowed. Some animals are excluded. What are we excluding? Well, any animal that was involved in robeya actively or nirba passively, those are excluded. And so it seems that those are the same. It has to be an animal that could potentially be either the robeya or the nirba. Then it's excluded, it cannot be a korban. So we learn, kol hecha de'ite berobeya, ite benirba. Kol hecha de'leta berobeya, lete benirba. So anytime that there is such an animal that could be a robeya, then it's prohibited also if it's a nirba. But anytime you have such a thing that cannot be a roveya, and that's including a bird cannot be the active partner, can't be a roveya. Therefore, even though it could potentially be a nirba, if it is, it's not disqualified. So do we say that the whole disqualification applies to animals and not to birds? Or do we say, at the end, that a sin happened with this bird, and therefore it should be disqualified, and it doesn't matter whether it can be robeya and nirba or only nirba, it should be disqualified. So that's Rabbi Yirmiyah's question. Amar Rabba Tashema, Rabbi Akiva machshir beba'ale mumin, v'im ita nachshir nameh benirba ho'il v'chasher be'ofot shema'amina. So we can learn from here where Rabbi Akiva says that if you have a blemish in the eye of an animal, then you leave it up. Why? Because there is a similar case for birds where the black blemish is not a problem. So since there is a case where the blemish is not a problem regarding birds, and so too with animals, he says you leave it up. Now, if you would follow this logic, if it would be true that for birds who are involved in nirba would be sacrificable, well then you would have to say that an animal also that was nirba should be kosher, meaning that you should not take it down. You should leave it up there if you put it up there, because there is a situation where such a status makes it acceptable, and that was regarding ofot, where even if it's nirba, still it's sacrificable. So, b'di avad, an animal that's nirba should be okay. But nobody says that in the Mishnah. There's no opinion, there's no argument about robeya and nirba. It's pasul according to everybody, and therefore it must be that for a bird also, that a bird involved in such an act would be prohibited as a sacrifice. Amar Rav Nachman, Abar Yitzchak, af anan nami tanena, hanirba v'mukse v'han'ibad, ve'etnan umchir v'tumtum, ve'anderoginos, kulan metamein begadim, abeta beli'ah shema'minha. Rav Yitzchak says, we have a baraita that supports this, that these prohibitions apply to a bird also, because here it has a list. Hanirba, so that's the passive partner, and something that is mukseh, that is set aside for idolatry, or if it was served as idolatry, or used as payment for a zonah, or for keleb, or if it's tumtum androginos, all these things will cause tum'ah of begadim in the throat. Well, what causes tum'ah when it's in the throat? That's a bird. So it means that all these things apply to a bird, and one of them is nirba. So therefore you see that there is a concept of nirba regarding a bird, and that supports what we derived here from based on reason is in fact proved. Rabbi Chanina Segana Kohanim. Now back to the Mishnah. Rabbi Chanina Segana, he said, my father would reject the blemished animal from the altar. My kamash malan. Why is he teaching us this? Why is he saying that his father used to do this? Maybe he wants to tell you an incident, to say it's not just a theoretical halacha, it actually happened, and my father, he was kohen, and this happened, and he rejected it. Or another opinion says, when it says doche, my father pushed it away, it means he did it kilachariad. He did it privately, not publicly. There was an animal with a blemish on it, but he didn't want to disgrace the altar by going and publicly taking it and throwing it off. Not so nice. It's embarrassing. And so he pushed it off, like when no one was looking, he kicked it off, and so that he didn't think it's allowed to be on. He disagrees with Rabbi Akiva, but he didn't want to make a big spectacle out of it. Keshem Shim Allah, the Mishnah continues, this is just like if it goes up, you don't bring it down. So too, if it falls off, then you don't put it back on. Amar Ula, lo shanu ela shelo mashla behen ha'ur, ava mashla behen ha'ur ya'alua. Ula said that's only true if the fire did not take hold of it yet. So you shouldn't have put it on. Now you put it on by mistake. And so now, okay, you're not going to take it off, but you just put it on and it fell off. It was kind of on the side, hanging down, and it fell off and didn't yet catch on fire. Then don't put it on. Leave it off. However, if it already caught fire, so now it fell off and it's still burning. Okay, well then what are you going to do? Leave it on the floor burning? No, then you have to put it back on. Rav Mari matne aresha. Rav Mari said that Ula's statement is going on the resha, meaning the previous Mishnah, our Mishnah here that we just learned, as we just explained it, that if you have a korban that's pasul and you should not put it on, and then it falls off, and well, you leave it off. But if it's already on fire, then you do put it back on. So Rav Mari explained that Ula was explaining the previous Mishnah. However, Rav Chanina misura matnei sefa. Rav Chanina said that Ula said this as a commentary on the next Mishnah coming up. That reads, Hatzamot v'gidin v'hakarnayim v'atelafayim bizman shemechubarim ya'alu, preshu lo ya'alu. There are various parts of an animal that are not edible and really should not be burnt. That's the bones, the tendons, the horns, the hoofs of a burnt offering. If it's attached to the flesh of the offering, then you put them ya'alu, you can put them on. But if they are separated, then you don't put them on. So these are not really part of the flesh, part of the meat of the animal. So it depends if they're connected or not. That is what the Mishnah said. Amar ula uloshanu ela shelo mashla behen ha'ur ava mashla behen ha'ur ya'alu. When we say that if they're separated, that you don't put them up there, that only means if they are not already on fire. But if they are on fire, then you put them back on. In other words, if they are attached, then you put them on. If they're not attached, you don't put them on. But if they are, even if they're not attached, and they already are on fire, then, well, you got to put them up because they're already on fire. Man de matne asefa kol sheken aresha uman de matne aresha val asefa la bene haktara ninhu. The opinion that says he's talking about the sefa, the next Mishnah, those things are not usable at all. They're not subject to burning. And so if those things you leave on, you put back on when they're burning, all the more so the things in the resha, which are technically subject to burning. It's just that it's invalid. So that is more likely that you would put it back on. So certainly, if those items that are invalid fell off, but they're burning, certainly you'd put them back on. However, the opinion that says that Ula was describing the Resha, the previous case, would say, yeah, only in that case, these are subject to burning. It's just that it's invalid. If it's burning, you put it back on. But the Sefa, where we're talking about bones and tendons and things that aren't supposed to be burnt at all, there, if it's even if it's burning already, you don't put it on. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.